So now that Echo has released, I thought it was a pretty good time to do an updated ranking of the various Disney Plus Marvel shows, especially since it's going to be a while until our next one, because X-Men 97 and Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man are both supposed to debut this year, but we don't know for sure when, just that X-Men 97 is supposed to be early this year, and Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which was Spider-Man freshman year, is supposed to be late this year sometime. We also have Agatha Darkhold Diaries, which is our only other live-action show this year besides Echo, and that's not going to be until the end of the year, so it's honestly kind of a slow year for Marvel, which I know a lot of people are happy about, but it does feel weird not to have a bunch of Marvel projects on the horizon besides whatever Sony is doing. So there are technically 11 Marvel shows for Disney Plus, but I'm not going to count I Am Groot on this list because it's not really fair to the show since it's just a bunch of 2 to 3 minute shorts. It would easily barely make it onto the list in last place if I was picking it. But I was also debating whether to separate different seasons, like What If getting 2 ranks since season 2 came out in December, and Loki getting 2 seasons as well since season 2 came out in October, but decided it was best to leave each show as one ranking. And most of the shows on this list are currently classed as miniseries, and out of everything on this list, only What If is actually confirmed to be getting another season. Loki seems to be officially done after 2 seasons, but Moon Knight, Miss Marvel and She-Hulk are rumoured to be getting looked at for potential second seasons, which to be honest I'm completely down for. A big thing TV has over movies in my opinion is the ability to let the audience really spend time with these characters, and for these shows to end after 1 season, regardless of quality, is kind of a waste. But anyway, here's how I'd rank all 10 Marvel Disney Plus shows. So Secret Invasion is the one show on this list that I was just completely disappointed in, like 100% disappointed in. The trailers for it were nothing short of fantastic, and everyone was talking about it like we were about to see Marvel's Andor. The show was adapting one of Marvel's biggest storylines, and then just failed to do anything interesting with it at all. The show brought a bunch of really interesting new cast members into the MCU, but then put them in characters and villains that just weren't very interesting. The fact that the Marvels came out a few months after the final of Secret Invasion and failed to address really anything that the show had kind of just felt like the entire show was sort of a waste of time and just this mini side adventure inside the MCU than what it should have been, which is something that really should have shaken the earth part of Marvel's TV shows and movies as much as possible. Throughout the show there were hints and teases of really great dialogue, mainly between like Nick Fury and Talos, or Nick Fury and Olivia Colman's new character Sonya, but these scenes were so few and far between and split up by characters like Maria Hill or Gaia or Gravik not living up to their potential at all. Maria Hill, for example, being one of the biggest wastes Marvel's had in a character in a while. It's kind of crazy that out of 15 years of the MCU almost, Maria Hill has been utilised far more in a few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. than in any movies or in Secret Invasion. And Secret Invasion had been my most hyped project on the Marvel slate ever since it was announced, and based on how disappointed I was, it really kind of shook my excitement in the future of the MCU because I felt it was so generic and useless, and I was like, well, if they're going to waste something like Secret Invasion, why should I be excited for the next big things they have coming? So straight off, I just want to say that I don't think She-Hulk was for me. I actually have a lot of respect for the show despite it being this low on the list, and I really appreciate that this is one of the few Marvel Disney Plus shows that did actually try and feel like a TV show, like it had the structure and it was built like a TV show. It felt like a legitimate season of TV and not a movie stretched out into 6 or 9 parts the way a lot of the other shows on this list do, and every episode being focused around a different character or a different case in Jennifer's life was smart. The fourth wall breaking made her a unique character in the MCU, and the final of the show was legitimately really unique and unexpected. But all that said, I did have kind of a hard time getting into it. I found myself a little bored week in, week out. Didn't really feel like any of the characters they brought into the show were used to their full potential, or that anything very interesting was done with any of them. That said, I do really hope the show gets a second season because I think it would improve on all of the pieces we had in the first season. So What If is the definition of a mixed bag in my opinion. Some episodes of the show are legitimately some of the coolest things we've seen come out of Marvel. Other times you kind of question why you're watching this show at all, and similar to She-Hulk, I really do respect the show's proper approach to television storytelling, because both seasons 1 and 2, they tell mostly standalone and one-off episodes that then combine towards the end of the season to kind of feel like everything you watched this season was important and was building towards the final. Fortunately though, I do feel like the show doesn't really tell as much story as it could. Regularly, the setups for the episodes don't sound as interesting as they should. A running joke in the fandom is actually how some no-brainer what-if scenarios that everyone's kind of asking for are just not happening, while more silly and goofy setups and ones are taking the forefront. And then when we do get the episodes that we feel like would make really good what-if concepts, they feel like they go in a direction that doesn't utilize the what-if scenario to its full potential, and once the episode ends you don't really feel like anything went as far as it could have. But again, this isn't always the case. Like the Doctor Strange episodes are some of the most depressing things we've seen in Marvel yet. Just overall though, What If definitely could be better. It feels like it just fails to live up to its potential, which I feel like is a problem with a lot of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. So I genuinely really like a lot of WandaVision because it does swing for the fences quite often throughout the course of the show, and deciding to have certain episodes mimic sitcoms from a certain time period is really cool, and it works incredibly well. The show also handles tone in a way that few Marvel projects have been able to manage. Like the moments when Vision kind of realizes that what's going on and how weird everything is are so creepily well done, and it's so apparent that this is a show that has serious care and passion put into it by the people who are making it, and all this makes up half of the show. That half of the show is incredible and was a fantastic way to kick off Marvel's fourth phase. Like, WandaVision is the first project in the new era of Marvel, pretty much. That said, though, the incredible elements make up half of the show. The other half, that is mostly set outside of Westview, is generic. It's what you expect from a current Marvel project. It brings in characters from other movies and just has them kind of talk to each other in a way that is filled with exposition, explaining prior movies, making jokes that don't land, and you're kind of switching between the Westview elements that are fantastic with the real world elements that are what you're already bored of by this point in Marvel's history. Unfortunately, this leads up to the Marvel elements taking over the show for its final, which means WandaVision has one of the most underwhelming finals on this list as well, in my opinion. So full disclosure, I was quite disappointed in Moon Knight. It was unfortunately never really what I wanted it to be. It had its moments scattered throughout, but when it first came out, I spent most weeks watching it and then being sad that it wasn't what I expected. Now, I did rewatch it a few months ago, and knowing what it was now made me enjoy it a lot more. I don't think anything in Moon Knight reaches the highs that the best of WandaVision puts out, but Moon Knight is definitely one of the most consistent shows on this list. Like, the quality remains the same throughout. It never really gets bad, but it never really gets amazing either. It just kind of stays consistently solid throughout the entire thing, which is more than most shows on this list have. And it does a good job at making you invested in the characters and the stories it's telling. Now, Ethan Hawke's villain Arthur Harrow is definitely underwhelming, and they should have used Ethan Hawke a lot better, but Oscar Isaac is great as both Stephen Grant and Mark Spector, and the little tease we got for Jake Lockley at the end kind of makes it hard to believe this was planned as just a one-season show. Like, that feels like a cliffhanger for a second season if I've ever seen one. It's definitely one that would benefit from a second season in almost every way as well. And it's a little disappointing though that for the most part the action kind of gets skipped over as we jump around inside Stephen and Mark's minds, but overall the show does really handle this and the mystery element well enough where you kind of want to see what happens next and you really want to see how it plays out. Oscar's Moon Knight is also one of the characters introduced to the MCU through a TV show that I feel like would really work well in the movies whenever he makes a jump. Honestly, I'm just surprised they've not really done a whole lot with Moon Knight yet. Like, the reception and the views might not have been what they expected for the show and what they might not have hoped for the show, but I feel like Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight is such a cool casting that for him not to have appeared in the movies yet, for him to not to have appeared in another show yet is kind of crazy. So fingers crossed we get a second season, because without a second season there's not a whole lot of places in the future of the MCU that we have for properly announced projects for him to show up just yet. So Echo is the most recent show on this list, and it's pretty much a sequel to Hawkeye despite being talked about as a standalone project. Now, in my opinion, Echo kind of serves as both a sequel to Hawkeye and a prequel to Daredevil Born Again, and I do find it a little weird how people keep talking about Marvel Spotlight, which that's what Echo was the first project in, Marvel Spotlight, which is Marvel's new banner. I find it weird that people keep talking about Marvel Spotlight like it's going to be this sort of standalone bunch of projects that are outside of the not outside of the MCU, but that don't have to tie into the main MCU stories, when it feels like they're just going to be used for origin stories. Like, it feels like this is just going to be an avenue for Marvel to tell more solo stories, and it's just going to be where a lot of their origin projects will go from now on. That they'll still be tied to the MCU, they'll just be origin projects, because Echo is both an origin story for the character but also very heavily connected to both prior and upcoming projects. I feel like, that's what Marvel's Spotlight will be. There's nothing standalone about it. They're just going to be projects that focus on one character, but that character still ties into the wider story of what the MCU is trying to tell at that point. That said, I did find Echo to be something of a mixed bag as well. Quite often it put out some really cool moments, and it feels like the most Netflix Defenders era of Marvel that we've got in a while, but sometimes it does feel like kind of weirdly paced and a little rushed. The final is the worst example of this, and we know that some crucial scenes and even an episode from the show were cut at some point, and that is really evident the further into the show you get. Episodes 1 to 3 actually work kind of really well, but then in episodes 4 and 5 it feels like they lose momentum, and before you have a chance to breathe, the show is already wrapping up and you're kind of left asking, wait, how did we get here already? It is the first project to include both Kingpin and Daredevil since Daredevil Season 3 in 2018 though, so that alone is something noteworthy. And everyone keeps making fun of that Daredevil fight, but I legitimately thought that Daredevil fight was great. Like, it feels like a cool middle ground between his Netflix fights and what we saw in SheHulk. I thought it was great. I don't know. So Hawkeye is just all around a really fun time, like giving Clint Barton more to do in this than he's done in the entire MCU thus far. I'm bringing in Kate Bishop and pairing her with Yelena from Black Widow, reintroducing Kingpin into the current MCU, introducing Echo. There's so much going on in this show. And to top it all off, the entire thing has a Christmas cover on it. And the MCU honestly kind of just needs more Disney Plus shows like this. I feel like taking an established hero and character, setting it to the backdrop of a time of year, using the show to dig a little deeper into the character than the movies have, while also bringing in some new and old characters in interesting places. Like, the show doesn't need to be based around some big Marvel event or world-ending event, just a hero trying to stop some bad guys with maybe some personal stakes. Hawkeye is also a show that would really benefit from a second season, and with Kate Bishop front and center, but it looks like Kate is just going to be incorporated into the Young Avengers and some team up movies, so who knows when we'll get to see some good solo Hawkeye content next. But Hawkeye was a really fun show. I really like it. Miss Marvel is kind of a weird one to talk about for me because I absolutely love most of it. I think the direction the show takes for the first few episodes is fantastic. It establishes a great roster of new characters, and a man as Kamala Khan could honestly not be better casting. But around the midpoint, the show takes a pretty drastic turn in the story it's telling. It changes locations, characters, and story to tell something completely different, which is fine, but then the show immediately returns to all of the status quo shortly after this to leave the show with this feeling of a bit of a hole in the middle, where it just feels like it switches back and forth, tone-wise, character-wise, show-wise, and that's honestly why this show isn't one rank higher on this list. But that said, I think this is easily a slam dunk in terms of introducing a character for the first time. These Disney Plus shows that are based around non-movie characters already have an uphill battle before they even come out, because they have to win over a general audience and make a general audience interested in a brand new character. But I think Miss Marvel straight away makes a compelling case for why you should care and why you should want to see Kamala Khan in the movies. And this was especially important because Kamala seems to be the face of the younger generation of Marvel going forward, if the end of the Marvels is something to go off of. And Kamala is also one of the first Disney Plus characters to make the jump to the movies, and that's no small feat. And it's incredible because most of the reviews for the Marvels say she was a standout part. This is also another show that I think would 100% benefit from a second season. It's also just really stylistically cool, and I'd love to see more of what they did there. So Captain America the Winter Soldier is still to this day my favourite MCU film. I don't think there's another film in the MCU that is as compelling and as well put together as that one, though a lot do come close. But I always really wanted a proper sequel to Winter Soldier, and as much as I do love Civil War, I felt like it wasn't really a sequel to Captain America 2 as much as I wanted. I felt like Falcon and the Winter Soldier was as much extremely similar to Winter Soldier in visual style, tone-wise, music-wise. The new characters they introduced, like John Walker and Battlestar, felt like they really fit in well, and that they would fit in well in that film. I also feel like this is the only truly underrated show in Marvel's Disney Plus lineup. Like, this is the only show that doesn't get the love or appreciation it deserves, in my opinion, because it really does feel like a great use of both Bucky and Sam, digging into Sam's family life, digging into Bucky's PTSD and guilt, putting these characters on their paths for the new MCU, and finally making Sam into Captain America. It's all so good. I absolutely loved it. My only major complaint with the show are the villains. I feel like the Flag Smashers didn't really work in this show at all, and while I think tying them to the snap was smart, the actual writing of them left a bit to be desired. Now, the rest of the show, though, was honestly pretty much exactly what I hoped it would be, though. One issue, though, it's kind of insane that this came out in 2021, and it's now 2024. We still have not seen Sam's Captain America pop up anywhere. We've not seen Bucky again anywhere. So what if, like, I don't know. I know Bucky's going to be in Thunderbolts. I know Captain America's going to be in his own movie next year. It feels like, though, that there's a huge gap in when we've seen the character last and when we're seeing them next, when most of the other Disney Plus shows have had some sort of follow-up in terms of their characters thus far. So Loki season 1 was already fantastic. The show would be in the number 1 spot on this list just based off of that season. It was an excellent look into Loki that never went down the redemption path post-Avengers, bringing in the TVA and Owen Wilson's Mobius, instantly being one of the best new additions to the MCU post-Endgame. Loki felt like it could do absolutely anything in the context of the MCU. Like, season 1 was great, and then season 2 came out, and season 2 wasn't great, it was perfect. I'd put season 2 of Loki alongside my favourite seasons of Daredevil and my favourite seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think Loki Season 2 took the show and excelled it to the heights that even the best of comic book media sometimes can't reach. This season felt so incredibly well thought out, so planned, so well written. It felt like everything from seasons 1 and 2 all culminated in a final that makes sense and made everything worthwhile. And Loki Season 2 is what I now point to when talking about the future of the MCU and saying everything going forward should be this well planned and this well thought out. I had no idea season 2 was already the final season when watching until the final episode came out, and I was like, honestly, if they decide not to continue, then that's kind of a perfect ending for the show. And then directors and writers came out and were like, yeah, we're not planning anymore besides maybe a TVA spin-off. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. That's a tight 2-season show right there. I love shows that only have a couple seasons and get to end on their terms and feel like everything in them happened for a reason, and that's exactly what Loki is and what Loki feels like. Honestly, I think Loki is the only show on this list that I can't really think of any issues I have with it. The Jonathan Majors Kang stuff, I guess, could be talked about as an issue, but that's not even in the hands of the people who made this show. Like, they couldn't control that stuff. And plus, they honestly ended Kang's story here in a way so perfectly that if they never wanted to continue his story in the movies, then Loki wrapped it up in a way that they can easily be seen as an ending. So yeah, perfect show, honestly. It's actually kind of crazy that we're only on our 3rd year of the Marvel stuff and we already have 10 separate shows, but that's how I'd rank all of them. But how would you rank the various shows? Let me know, and if you enjoy this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and all of that, and have a fantastic day.